How could a single army conquer the entire known world on foot? How could a horde of horseback archers erase empires that took centuries to build in a matter of weeks? Today, we're not just counting down soldiers, we're dismantling the 10 deadliest war machines ever assembled by human hands. Armies so lethal, so perfectly designed for destruction, that some of them remained undefeated for over a century. One of them never lost a single battle in 13 years of non-stop war. Another one was so terrifying that enemy cities surrendered before a single rider even appeared on the horizon. And the one sitting at number 1 didn't just win wars, it built a civilization that still rules the way you think, speak, and live today. But here's what no one tells you. These weren't just armies. They were extinction-level events wearing armor, from walls of steel to shadows on horseback, from frozen mountain crossings to rivers running red with the blood of kings. This is the Immortals, where legends never die. If you make it to the end of this list, you'll understand why the ancient world lived in constant fear. And trust me, Number 1 will change the way you see history forever. Number 10, Qin Dynasty Army. Long before the Industrial Revolution, long before factories and assembly lines, there was an army that mass-produced death with a precision that wouldn't be matched for 2,000 years. The Qin Dynasty Army was not a fighting force, it was the first industrialized war machine in human history, designed with one single terrifying purpose: the total annihilation of every rival state in China. While the rest of the ancient world still relied on the individual courage of warriors and handcrafted weapons, the Qin turned the battlefield into a factory floor. Every arrowhead, every crossbow trigger, every sword blade was manufactured using exact measurements and universal molds, all supervised by the state. If a weapon shattered in the chaos of battle, any soldier could grab a part from a fallen comrade's gear and repair his weapon instantly, without retreating a single step. This wasn't war, this was logistics operating at a scale the world had never imagined. They mobilized and fed armies of over 600,000 men, a number so colossal that Europe wouldn't see anything like it until Napoleon, nearly 2,000 years later. But here's what made the Qin truly horrifying. Their entire society was a war machine. Every peasant was a potential soldier. Every victory was measured not in glory or honor, but in severed heads. A legalist merit system meant that a soldier's only path to land, status, and survival was the number of enemy skulls he brought back from the front lines. For the Qin, war was not a matter of courage. It was statistical efficiency, industrial-scale killing with a government stamp of approval. Their crossbows launched coordinated volleys that darkened the sky, shredding through armor before the enemy could even get close enough to swing a sword. And once the arrows did their work, heavy infantry advanced with long spears and bronze swords coated in chromium oxide to prevent corrosion. Let that sink in. A rust prevention technology that the modern world would not reinvent and patent until 1937. The Qin weren't ahead of their time, they were ahead of our time. And if you think a factory of death sounds terrifying, wait until you meet an army that made the entire world believe its soldiers could not die. Number 9. Persian Immortals. Imagine standing on a battlefield. You've been fighting for hours, your arms are burning, your shield is cracked, and you've watched your men cut down dozens of enemy soldiers. But when you look across the field, their ranks are exactly the same. Not a single gap, not one missing face, as if no one has died, as if they are regenerating. That is what it felt like to face the Persian Immortals. And that fear, that creeping, soul-crushing doubt that you might be fighting something inhuman, was entirely by design. The Immortals were the most elite unit of the Achaemenid Empire and the personal bodyguard of the King of Kings. Their name wasn't a poetic exaggeration. It was the foundation of one of the most brilliant psychological warfare operations in ancient history. The unit was maintained at exactly 10,000 men. Not one more, not one less. The precise moment a soldier fell in combat, was wounded, or even fell sick, a perfectly trained replacement stepped into his position so seamlessly, so invisibly, that the enemy never saw the switch. From across the battlefield, opposing generals watched in horror as hours of brutal carnage produced zero visible casualties. The Persian line looked untouched, pristine, immortal. They weren't fighting men anymore. They were fighting a concept, an infinite wall of spears that death itself could not thin. Recruits were selected exclusively from Persian and Median nobility, torn from their families at the age of 5 and subjected to years of training that would break most grown men. Survival in extreme conditions, absolute mastery of horsemanship, a moral code built on one principle above all others: absolute truth. By the time they reached the battlefield, they weren't just soldiers. They were a symbol, the living proof that the Persian Empire could not be exhausted, could not be outlasted, and could not be killed. Their assault began with a suffocating rain of arrows designed to shatter shields and morale simultaneously. Once the enemy was disoriented and bleeding, they charged with short spears and razor-sharp daggers called akinekes, adapting to any terrain, from scorching deserts to narrow mountain passes, with a versatility that no other ancient unit could match. To face the immortals was to face the infinite, and the infinite does not negotiate, but even the infinite has limits, and the next army on this list proved it by humiliating the greatest superpower on Earth in its own backyard. Number 8. Carthaginian Army. What happens when you take the fiercest warriors from 3 different continents, mercenaries who share no language, no culture, no flag, and forge them into a single weapon under the command of one man? You get the army that brought Rome to its knees. The Carthaginian army under Hannibal Barca is not just a chapter in military history, it is the chapter that military academies around the world still study today, as the textbook definition of tactical genius. Unlike Rome's legions, built from citizens burning with patriotic duty, Hannibal's force was a mosaic of hired killers, held together by nothing but the brilliance and magnetism of a single commander. Under his banner marched the savage Celts of Gaul, disciplined Iberian swordsmen armed with the devastating falcata, Balearic slingers whose stones could cave in a skull from 200 meters, and the legendary Numidian cavalry, African riders who controlled their horses without bridles and were considered the finest horsemen the ancient world had ever produced. But the true insanity of this army was proven during its crossing of the Alps in the dead of winter, 218 BC. A suicidal march through frozen mountain passes, ambushes by hostile tribes, and avalanches that swallowed men and war elephants whole. Thousands died on that crossing. And yet the survivors emerged on the other side and did the unthinkable. They brought the war directly to Rome's doorstep. For 15 consecutive years, this army operated on Italian soil without receiving a single reinforcement, not one supply shipment from Carthage. They lived off the land, adapted, improvised, and systematically destroyed every Roman army sent to stop them. And then came Cannae, the single most devastating day in Roman military history. Hannibal executed the most perfect double envelopment maneuver ever recorded, allowing his outnumbered force to completely surround and annihilate nearly 80,000 Roman legionaries in a single afternoon. The killing was so efficient, so mechanical, that Rome lost almost an entire generation of fighting men before the sun went down. The city was forced to recruit slaves and children just to avoid total extinction after the slaughter. Hannibal's men collected the gold rings from the fingers of fallen Roman knights. There were so many, they filled 3 large baskets. He sent them back to Carthage as proof, not of victory, but of extermination. And if an army of mercenaries could break Rome, imagine what a force of fanatics who believed death was a reward could do to an entire continent. Number 7. The Great Heathen Army. When a single square sail appeared on the horizon, entire kingdoms went silent. Bells rang in churches, farmers abandoned their fields, mothers hid their children, because everyone knew what that sail meant. The Northmen were coming, and by the time you saw them, it was already too late. The Viking armies, known as the Great Heathen Army, were not disorganized bands of savages swinging axes. They were elite strike forces with a strategic mobility that the medieval world could not comprehend until entire kingdoms had already burned to the ground. The heart of their war machine was the longship, the Drakkar, a masterpiece of naval engineering so advanced that it could cross the open Atlantic in a storm, and then, moments later, glide silently up a shallow river barely a meter deep. This meant no city was safe, not on the coast, not inland, not behind walls. The Vikings could appear anywhere, at any time, strike with surgical brutality, and vanish before a single defending army could even assemble. While feudal Europe moved in slow, heavy columns of armored knights, the Vikings operated like ghosts, hit and move, burn and extract. They didn't initially seek to hold territory. They sought to paralyze entire regions with such overwhelming terror that kings would pay them mountains of silver just to leave. And it worked. Their expansion didn't stop at the coasts of England and France. They besieged Paris, They reached the gates of Constantinople. They founded ruling dynasties in Russia. They settled Iceland, reached Greenland, and touched the shores of North America 500 years before Columbus ever set sail. But what made the individual Viking warrior so dangerous wasn't just his skill with an axe, it was his religion. The Norse belief system taught that death in battle was not an ending, it was a promotion. The only path to Valhalla, the eternal hall of warriors, was to die fighting. This eliminated the survival instinct entirely. You weren't facing a man afraid to die, you were facing a man desperate to. Upon landing, they formed the shield wall, a compact barrier of overlapping wood and iron that absorbed arrows and charges, while their two-handed Dane axes, weapons capable of splitting a horse in half with a single swing, shattered anything that came close. And here's something the movies never show you. Vikings were obsessively clean. Archaeologists have found more combs and grooming tools in Viking graves than weapons. They believed a warrior must be presentable when he enters the Hall of the Gods. They killed like demons and groomed like kings. Now, if the Vikings were the lightning bolt that struck from the sea, the next army was the earthquake that swallowed the land whole. Number 6, the Hunnic Horde. They had no cities, no castles, no borders. Their home was the saddle of a horse, and their only law was total annihilation. When the Huns appeared on the edges of the Roman world, historians didn't describe them as an army. They described them as the scourge of God, a divine punishment sent to erase civilization itself. Under the command of Attila, the Hunnic Horde didn't just redefine warfare, it broke the ancient world's understanding of what war could even be. Every other empire built walls, dug trenches, and fortified positions. The Huns laughed at all of it, because you cannot fortify against something that moves faster than information itself. Every Hunnic warrior rode with 5 to 7 horses, rotating between them mid-march, allowing the horde to cover up to 150 kilometers in a single day. To put that in perspective, a Roman legion considered 30 kilometers a hard day's march. The Huns moved 5 times faster than the most disciplined army on earth. Attila could appear on one frontier, and before the messenger warning of his arrival even reached the next city, he was already there, burning it. Their strategy wasn't conquest. It was extortion on a continental scale. If a city opened its gates and paid tribute, it survived. If it resisted, even for a day, it was erased. Not captured, not occupied, erased. Every man, woman, and child put to the sword as a message to the next city down the road, and the message was always received. This system of terror allowed Attila to drain tons of Roman gold without ever needing to administer a single province. He didn't want your land, he wanted your fear. And your gold. The Huns' impact on history went far beyond their battles. Their westward push triggered a catastrophic domino effect of mass migrations that destabilized the entire Western Roman Empire. Tribes fleeing the Huns crashed into Roman borders, and the empire that had stood for centuries began to crack under the pressure. It took a desperate, unprecedented alliance between Rome and the Visigoths, mortal enemies forced to fight side by side, to finally slow Attila's advance at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains. The only time his war machine ever met a true limit. Their composite recurve bows, built from layers of bone and sinew, could pierce heavy armor from 200 meters at a full gallop. They would unleash a storm of arrows, then feign a panicked retreat, luring the enemy into a reckless chase, straight into an ambush where heavy cavalry was waiting to finish the slaughter. And if their tactics weren't terrifying enough, their appearance was. The Huns practiced cranial deformation from infancy, binding their skulls to create an elongated, alien shape. When enemy soldiers saw them charging out of the dust, they didn't think they were fighting men. They thought the demons had come. And honestly, they weren't entirely wrong. But if the Huns were the earthquake, the next force on this list was the immovable mountain that no earthquake could shake. The Spanish tercios. For 150 years, there was one formation on Earth that simply did not lose. They fought on 3 continents. They faced every major power of their era. France, England, the Ottoman Empire, Protestant rebels, Italian city-states. And for a century and a half, they broke them all. The Spanish tercios were not just soldiers, they were the fist of God on earth. Born from the crucible of the Granada War and perfected during the brutal Italian campaigns by the legendary El Gran Capitan, the tercios represented something the world had never seen before, a fully professional volunteer infantry force. that combined medieval ferocity with modern firepower in a system of combined arms that was centuries ahead of its time. While the rest of Europe still threw waves of conscripted peasants and armored knights at each other, Spain created something different. Every man in a tercio chose to be there. They weren't drafted, they weren't forced. They walked into the most dangerous profession on earth because they wanted glory, fortune, and the knowledge that they were the best. And they were. Their training was so intense that a tercio could execute complex battlefield maneuvers under direct enemy fire without a single man breaking formation. Their endurance was the stuff of legend. At the Battle of Empel, surrounded, outnumbered, and freezing in the Dutch winter, they refused to surrender. They chose to fight to the last man. And then the river froze overnight, allowing them to counterattack and win a battle that should have been their grave. They called it a miracle. Their enemies called it madness. The secret of their dominance was the pike square, a hedgehog formation of up to 3,000 men, where rows of pikemen created an impenetrable forest of steel points, while arquebusiers and musketeers moved to the flanks, delivered devastating volleys, and then retreated back under the protection of the pikes. Heavy cavalry, the dominant force of medieval warfare for 1,000 years, became obsolete overnight. You cannot charge into a wall of 6-meter pikes backed by gunfire. You can only die trying. The tercios were the engine that sustained the empire on which the sun never set. And they were so proud, so fanatically disciplined, that they would often refuse to collect their pay for months if they believed the cause was noble enough. But if the delay was due to negligence or disrespect, they staged the most organized, most dangerous mutinies in military history. Even in rebellion, they were terrifyingly professional. Their decline only came when the rest of Europe finally learned to copy their model. But by then, the tercios had already carved their name into eternity as the infantry that never retreated. And if a wall of pikes and gunpowder sounds unbreakable, wait until you meet a city that didn't even need walls, because its citizens were the wall. Number 4, the Spartan army. Sparta didn't build walls. Every other city in Greece fortified itself behind stone and mortar. Sparta looked at those walls and said, "We don't need them, because our men are the wall." And for centuries, no army on earth proved them wrong. The Spartans were not soldiers in any conventional sense. They were the product of the most extreme social engineering experiment in human history. A system so brutal, so perfectly designed to manufacture warriors, that it erased everything that made a person human and replaced it with one thing: the ability to kill and the willingness to die without hesitation. It began at birth. Spartan elders inspected every newborn. If the child was deemed weak or deformed, it was left on a hillside to die. Those who survived faced something worse. At the age of 7, boys were ripped from their mothers and thrown into the agoge, a state-run training program that was less of a school and more of a 20-year crucible of suffering. They were given one cloak for the entire year, no shoes, barely enough food to survive. And that starvation was intentional. They were forced to steal food to stay alive, and if they were caught, they weren't punished for stealing. They were beaten savagely for being clumsy enough to get caught. The lesson was clear. Cunning matters more than morality, survival matters more than comfort, and the state matters more than you. By the time a Spartan man emerged from this system, every trace of fear, individuality, and mercy had been burned out of him. What remained was a component, a single interchangeable piece of the most disciplined killing machine the ancient world had ever seen. On the battlefield, the Spartan phalanx was not a formation, it was a living organism. Warriors locked shoulder to shoulder, their bronze shields overlapping into an unbroken wall of metal, layers of long spears jutting forward like the quills of some monstrous beast. They advanced in perfect rhythm, step by synchronized step, and the sound of that advance, the steady, unhurried crunch of sandals on dirt, the rhythmic clash of spear on shield, broke armies before contact was even made. Enemies didn't just fear the Spartans, they panicked, they ran, because you cannot fight something that shows no emotion, no hesitation, and no fear. At Thermopylae, 300 Spartans held the narrow pass against a Persian force that numbered in the hundreds of thousands. They knew they were going to die, every single one of them knew, and they walked into that pass anyway. Not because they were desperate, but because Spartan law forbade retreat and forbade surrender. The only acceptable outcomes were victory or death. And when death came, they met it the same way they met everything else, in perfect formation. A Spartan received a tombstone with his name only if he died in battle. For women, only if she died in childbirth. Both were considered equal sacrifices for the survival of the state. Everyone else was buried in silence, unnamed, forgotten. That is what it meant to be Spartan. And if a city of warriors with no walls sounds like the peak of ancient military power, the next army took everything Sparta built and turned it into something the world had never seen. A force that conquered the known world and never tasted defeat. Number 3. The Macedonian army. Every army before this one had a limit, a border they couldn't cross, an enemy they couldn't beat, a campaign they couldn't sustain. The Macedonian army under Alexander the Great had none. In 13 years of continuous warfare, across tens of thousands of kilometers of hostile terrain, against empires that outnumbered them 10-1, they never lost, not once, not a single battle. That is not a war record. That is a statistical impossibility made real by the most sophisticated military machine the ancient world ever produced. It began with Alexander's father, Philip II, who looked at the traditional Greek phalanx and saw its fatal flaw. It was strong but slow, powerful but rigid, so he rebuilt it from the ground up. The Macedonian phalanx was armed with the sarissa, a pike over 6 meters long, so long that the first 5 rows of soldiers could project their spear points forward simultaneously, creating a moving wall of iron tips that no enemy could reach through with a short sword. Trying to attack a Macedonian phalanx head-on was like trying to fight a forest of blades. You died before you got close enough to swing. But the phalanx was only half the equation. Alexander perfected the hammer and anvil. The phalanx was the anvil. It pinned the enemy in place, locked them into a grinding, desperate frontal struggle they couldn't escape. And while they were trapped, Alexander personally led the hammer. The companion cavalry, the hetairoi, the most elite mounted unit in the ancient world, smashed into the enemy's flank or rear at full gallop in a tight wedge formation, searching for one thing: the enemy commander. Cut the head off the snake and the body dies. Alexander did this again and again and again. At Granicus, at Issus, at Gaugamela, where he faced the full might of the Persian Empire, over 200,000 men, and shattered them in a single afternoon. His logistics were equally revolutionary. He abandoned the slow ox-drawn supply caravans that every other army depended on, and forced his soldiers to carry their own supplies on their backs. This made his army faster than any force on earth. He could march where no one expected, appear where no one was ready, and strike before anyone could react. With this machine, Alexander destroyed the Persian Empire, conquered Egypt, fought through the mountains of Central Asia, crossed into India. And he didn't just conquer. He was the first military commander in history to integrate scientists, engineers, cartographers, and botanists into his general staff. His campaign wasn't just a war. It was the largest scientific expedition the ancient world had ever seen. 13 years, thousands of miles, dozens of battles, 0 defeats. That is the Macedonian army. And if a force that never lost sounds like the ultimate weapon, the next one on this list conquered more land, killed more people, and moved faster than anything the world would see for another 700 years. Number 2. The Mongol horde. The Mongol army didn't conquer the world with superior numbers. They didn't conquer it with better armor or bigger swords. They conquered it by being so fast, so adaptive, and so psychologically devastating that entire civilizations surrendered without a fight, rather than face what was coming. Under Genghis Khan, the Mongol war machine became the most efficient instrument of destruction in human history. Every warrior was a self-contained unit of war. Each rider traveled with up to 5 spare horses, rotating between them without ever stopping, allowing the horde to cover 150 kilometers per day. Armies that should have had weeks to prepare found Mongol riders at their gates in days. Cities that thought they were safe behind 1,000 kilometers of open steppe woke up to the thunder of hooves and the whistle of arrows. The Mongols didn't just move fast, they moved faster than information. They arrived before their own reputation. Genghis Khan imposed a structure of iron discipline built on pure meritocracy. He didn't care about your bloodline, your tribe, or your past. If you could fight, you rose. If you couldn't, you were replaced. The army operated on a decimal system, units of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. communicating through flags and horn signals that allowed thousands of riders to execute complex maneuvers in real time across kilometers of open battlefield. But the true genius of the Mongols was their ability to learn. If they encountered a technology they didn't have, they didn't ignore it, they absorbed it. They recruited Chinese engineers to build siege weapons, Persian scholars to manage logistics, Muslim administrators to govern conquered cities. The Mongols didn't just destroy civilizations, they consumed them. They took the best of everything they conquered and added it to their own machine, growing stronger with every victory. Their signature tactic was the feigned retreat. They would attack, then appear to panic and flee in disorder. Enemy commanders, smelling blood, would order a full pursuit. For days the Mongols would run, stretching the enemy line thinner and thinner, pulling them further and further from safety. And then, at the perfect moment, in terrain they had chosen weeks in advance, the Mongols would turn, and the slaughter would begin. Composite bows built from layers of horn, wood, and sinew launched arrows capable of piercing heavy armor from 300 meters. At a full gallop, the pursuing army, exhausted, strung out, and completely surrounded, would be annihilated. This wasn't a battle tactic, it was a trap designed at a continental scale. The Mongol Empire became the largest contiguous land empire in human history. They killed an estimated 40 million people, a number so large that it actually caused a measurable drop in global carbon emissions. They didn't just change borders, they changed the atmosphere of the planet. And if the Mongols were the unstoppable force, the final army on this list was the immovable object, a machine so resilient, so adaptive, and so deeply woven into the fabric of civilization that its legacy didn't just survive the ancient world, it built the modern one. Number 1. The Roman legions. Every army on this list was deadly. Some were faster, some were more brutal, some never lost a battle. But only one of them built a world. The Roman legions take the number 1 spot not because they won every fight. They didn't. They were crushed at Cannae. They were humiliated in the Teutoburg forest. They suffered defeats that would have ended any other civilization. But that is exactly why they are number 1. Because they lost. And they came back. Every single time. Rome didn't produce the best individual warriors. The Spartans were tougher, the Mongols were faster, Alexander's men were more precise. But Rome produced something no other civilization in history could match: a system. A machine that didn't depend on one genius commander or one generation of elite soldiers. It was an institution, self-correcting, self-improving, eternal. When Rome lost a battle, it didn't collapse. It studied what went wrong, rebuilt its legions, adapted its tactics, and returned with a force specifically designed to counter whatever had beaten it before. Hannibal destroyed Roman army after Roman army for 15 years, and Rome simply kept building new ones, each one better than the last. Until Hannibal, the greatest tactical mind of the ancient world, was finally ground down by a machine that could not be exhausted. The true strength of the Roman legionary was not his gladius, though that short stabbing sword was devastatingly effective in close quarters. It was his shovel. Roman soldiers were soldier engineers. After marching 30 kilometers in full armor carrying over 30 kilos of equipment, they didn't rest, they built. Every single night they constructed a fully fortified camp with ditches, walls, and guard towers. Every night. From scratch. They built bridges over the Rhine in 10 days. They constructed siege walls that completely encircled entire cities, as they did at Alesia, where Caesar trapped an army inside a fortress and then built a second wall facing outward to hold off the relief force coming to rescue them. They were besieging a city while simultaneously being besieged themselves, and they won. The legion's tactical flexibility was unmatched. Unlike the rigid phalanx formations of Greece and Macedonia, Roman legions were divided into small independent units called maniples, and later cohorts, that could maneuver independently across broken terrain, respond to threats from any direction, and reform on the fly. They threw their pilum javelins to disable enemy shields, then closed in behind their massive rectangular scutum shields in the tortoise formation, stabbing with surgical precision in the tight, bloody chaos of close combat. But what truly set Rome apart was what happened after the battle. The Mongols destroyed and moved on. Alexander conquered and kept marching. Rome conquered and built roads, aqueducts, laws, cities, language. The legions didn't just win wars. They constructed the infrastructure of a civilization that still shapes every aspect of the modern world. The legal systems you live under, the languages you speak, the roads you drive on. The very concept of a republic, of citizenship, of civil engineering, all of it traces back to the boots of Roman legionaries marching into the unknown and building a world behind them. A Roman legionary carried so much equipment that they were mockingly called Marius's mules. But those mules carried civilization on their backs. And that is why, when every other army on this list has faded into legend, Rome's legacy is still standing. Not in ruins, not in museums, in the world you woke up in this morning. 10 armies, 10 war machines that shaped the world you live in today. But I need to know, if you had to stand on a battlefield and face one of these forces charging straight at you, which one would terrify you the most? And which one do you think was truly invincible? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this video made you feel something, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm to show this to more history lovers like you. And if you're not subscribed yet, you're missing the best of what's coming. We're just getting started. Now, if you think these armies were terrifying, wait until you see the horrors that ancient soldiers swore they saw with their own eyes. Creatures so nightmarish that battle-hardened warriors refused to march until priests blessed the ground. Click on your screen right now to watch the top 10 creatures ancient soldiers swore were real. I'll see you there.